Okay, so what'd you learn last week?
What did we learn last week?
What happened that was kind of unusual? Did Saul do something?
He was spared by David. And he could have been killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what did Saul do? Wasn't that last week?
Oh, he hated David. He wanted David destroyed.
Right. But one of the priests helped David.
Mm-hmm.
Abimelech. What happened to him?
Well, he ended up getting killed anyway, along with 84 others and all the women. And
85 priests.
Mm-hmm.
One guy
Because he gave him that sword.
gave a sword and bread to David.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kind of David's sword anyway. He killed Goliath.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right?
And a woman. Don't leave the woman out.
Well, God does. Anyway, so here's this slaughter of absolute innocent people for no reason
Yeah.
other than Saul's
Wanted them dead.
jealousy and insanity, right? And his sinfulness at that point. Okay? Well, this week's lesson in chapter 25, David almost does the same thing. Right? But we start out in verse 1, now Samuel died. And all Israel gathered together and mourned for him and buried him at his house in Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Okay? How do you think David felt when Samuel died?
Oh. I think he would feel lost.
Lost?
Mm-hmm.
Sad?
You'd think so.
Who anointed him as king?
Samuel did.
Now where's the proof? Do you think maybe he questioned if he was ever going to get the kingdom at that point?
Probably so.
You know?
Because he was just
Kind of a
young
trying
lad.
time, right? It says, and all Israel gathered together. Now, right before this, David saved Saul's life. Saul repented. So I'm guessing they were there together. How do you think Saul felt about Samuel's death?
He was probably pretty happy about it.
Kind of like good riddance, huh?
Yeah.
You who pronounced all this evil on me.
Yeah.
Right? He may not have been all that sad. But Israel was. Samuel had judged Israel for a long time, right? Do you think Israel was now beginning to wonder if they made the right choice in demanding a king?
You sure would think so.
The first one has turned out pretty sour.
Mm-hmm.
Started out good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now he's running around killing people for no reason. Right?
Jealousy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bang.
Now who actually did the killing?
Oh. What's his name?
Doeg?
Doeg. Yeah. Okay.
What was his ancestry?
I don't remember.
Edomite.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay? Now it says, and David went down to the wilderness of Paran. So it's kind of like his time in the wilderness. Who else has spent time in the wilderness?
Jesus did.
Yep. And
John.
John
John.
and It's almost really like who hasn't? Paul went out in the wilderness for 3 years
That's right. He
Right.
went down into Egypt.
and studied, right? When he got his head on straight after God saved him,
Yeah.
and he started to get everything back in perspective and realized all of this is about Jesus. Right? Okay? Anyway, and there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And it came about when he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. This is the time everybody could tell how wealthy you were. Right? Because here's all of this, all these sheep, and they're all being sheared, and so you got all the wool being shipped off and whatnot, right? Now the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. And the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings, and he was a Calebite. Who's a Calebite? Why did God tell us he was a Calebite? Who was Caleb?
He was one of the two that,
Yeah, the two good spies, right?
yeah,
And you remember when he was 85 years old, he went and said, I want this land over here. And Joshua says, it's yours, go get it, right? And that includes Hebron, okay, which is where David's first capital is going to be, right? So this guy is apparently the one who inherited the estate of Caleb, because he's very, very wealthy. Okay? Now it says, what does his name mean, by the way? Anybody know what Nabal means?
No.
Fool. Fool.
food,
Fool. How do you get a name Fool? Who would name you Fool right out of the room? I wonder if he's had it his whole life, or it was a nickname that came on him later because he was such a fool, or what. But that's his name. But his wife, Abigail, was intelligent and beautiful. How did people get married in those days? They're arranged. So her father gave a beautiful, intelligent woman to a fool to be a wife just because he had money.
Okay.
Right? Apparently. Would you do that to your daughter?
There would have been times my oldest daughter I would have.
You get rid of her.
But not no more.
Good. Right?
the oldest were supposed to be married first anyway, in those days.
Yeah.
Well, Caleb was a Kenizzite, which means he was an Edomite, the same as Doeg.
Okay.
Okay? That's in Genesis 36, by the way. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, visit Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say, have a long life, peace be with you, and peace to your house, and peace to all that you have. Right? Now that I have heard that you have shearers, now your shepherds have been with us, and we have not insulted them, nor have they missed anything all the days they were in Carmel. David and his men had been there. Now this is interesting. How did David get his men? We're in 1 Samuel 25, by the way. 1 Samuel 22. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented. gathered to him, David, and he became captain over them. Now there was about 400 men with him. Yet, they've seen how he's treated Saul, etc. So when his men are camped near Carmel, not one of them ever steals a single sheep. Can armies normally say that of any size? It reminded me of George Washington and the Revolutionary Army. You realize you'd be court-martialed if you swore.
Really?
Yeah. You're not allowed to use any bad language in George Washington's army. A little fact that O'Reilly decided to leave completely out of his book and the TV series they're doing, Legends and Lies. You know, by watching Legends and Lies, you would think God had absolutely nothing to do with the creation of this country, which he had everything to do with it. But nonetheless, I just think it's real interesting that here we have a situation where David's men, right, have become such men of character in a really short period of time. Okay? And we're going to find out later that they also protected them from the raiders, the Philistines, etc. Right? Okay? Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men have favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. Please give whatever you find at hand to your servants and to your son David. David's being very respectful of this fool. Right? When David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in David's name, and they waited. But Nabal answered David's servant, saying, Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? If he didn't know who he was, how would he know he was the son of Jesse?
Yeah, it's true.
So if he knew who David was and the son of Jesse, the odds are he knew he was the anointed. But yet he's showing no respect whatsoever, right? If David's the anointed, he's actually the king.
Right.
Who, by the way, has an army. Right? So there are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. You know, talking about David having to run from Saul, right? You're just a runaway slave kind of guy. Right? He says, Then I shall take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men whose origin I do not know. So David's young men retraced their way and went back and came and told him according to all these things. And David said to his men, Each of you gird up his sword. So each man girded his sword, and David also girded on his sword, which I suppose is the sword of Goliath. And about 400 men went up behind David, while 200 stayed with the baggage. Now he's got 600 men. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, Behold, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he scorned them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we were not insulted, nor we did miss anything, as long as they went about with them while we were in the fields. And they were a wall to us, both by night and day, all the time we were with them tending the sheep. David and his men protected them. Yet when it came time for a little bit of payback, he showed David nothing but disrespect.
What verse are you on?
Just finished 16,
Thank you.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, Abigail grabs up a bunch of stuff, gets some guys, takes it to David, right? And I can't but wonder, how many times has Abigail had to save his behind? from his foolishness. The name Nabal means fool. Right? I wonder how many times, because she's intelligent. He's not. So she goes to David to tell him. If I go down to 21, David had said, "Surely in vain I have guarded all this man has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed, all that belonged to him, and he has returned me evil for good. May God do so to the enemies of David, and more so, if by morning I leave as much as one male of any who belong to him." He's going to kill even the innocent, just because he's mad at one fool. Mm-hmm. You ever let your emotions get away from you?
Oh, yeah.
Say something, do something, and later you're like, oh my gosh. Shouldn't have done that. Right? So David is doing that right here. Abigail came to David in a hurry and dismounted from her donkey and fell on her face before David and bowed herself to the ground. Who is David? Actually, the king of Israel. Right? God's anointed. Mm-hmm. She shows him the respect that her husband did not. In verse 26, she says, "Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, since the Lord has restrained you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself by your own hand, now let your enemies and those who seek evil against my Lord be as Nabal." How did she know? David hadn't said anything yet. How did she know that the Lord has now restrained him? Does she think she's that good orator? Or do you think maybe she could tell by his countenance that he was no longer mad, ready for revenge? How many times has David said in the Psalms that you shouldn't return evil for good?
I don't know, but it's done since it was 150 Psalms.
Psalms 7, 28, 55, and 109, just to give examples. If we had time, we could look them all up, but right? This is one of David's core values.
Yeah.
Okay? Never return evil for good. Also being loyal to your friends. Reciprocity to those who deal kindly to you. Abigail's dealing kindly. Mm-hmm. So David calls them off. We're not going to go kill them all. Right? And David said in verse 32, David said to Abigail, oh, by the way, at the end of 31, Abigail finally says, when the Lord shall deal well with my Lord, remember your maidservant. And remember, she just said, may all of David's enemies be like Nabal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think she had a clue that something was about to happen to Nabal. Right? She'd saved his behind many times, but I think she figured it was done. And then she says, remember your maidservant. And David said to her, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. Who gets credit for getting David back in line? Abigail or the Lord God of Israel?
Lord.
David had a spiritual insight that most of us miss, where he sees God doing stuff whenever people just see people doing stuff. We were talking earlier about how God acts in our life and does things and causes things to happen that work together, Romans 8:28, to our good.
Yep.
And yet, all too often, we don't stop and say, that was God doing that. And give God the credit and the glory where it belongs. David does. And blessed be your discernment And blessed be you who have kept me this day from bloodshed, from avenging myself by my own hand. He won't avenge himself against Saul. Right? He won't raise his hand against Saul, who's trying to kill him.
Yeah.
But he's fixing to go out and chop up a whole bunch of innocent people because one guy's a fool. One guy's trying to kill him. The other guy just badmouthed him.
Yeah.
He won't kill the guy that's trying to kill him, but he's ready to slaughter the guy and his whole family who just badmouthed him. You know, right at the moment, he's got peace with Saul. When you're dealing with stuff and you get a relief and you kind of relax your guard, and suddenly Satan zings you from another angle, and then you get all out of whack over something really small.
I can relate to that.
You know? Years ago, when I was in the Amway business, one of the things that they taught us was you can tell the size of a man by the size of the thing it takes to make him mad.
That thought went through my mind right before you said that.
Right?
Say
So
that again.
you can tell the size of a man by the size of the thing it takes to make him mad. If you get mad real easy over little stuff, you're not that much of a man. Something needs to be worked on, right? Plus, it means that you yourself, as in this case with David, right, think that you're the one that's responsible for all the consequences of anything that happens, rather than let God do it. As we like to say, right, let go and let God. Who is more capable of doing it and doing it the right way?
Well, God is.
So why do we try to take the reins?
Because we feel that we have the ability and the right to do that. When I was 17 years old, I was at a special program for 2 years, 2 summers at East Central. It was the first of the Upward Bound programs. And I tried to kill my roommate. I was a good pool shooter. He was above average, but I just ran into a day, and he kept, like a mosquito, jabbing me and stuff, things I missed. And I got so mad, I took that pool cue, flicked it in the air, all in one motion. I had the small end, and I swung that thing right at his head. And I got 2 swings in before 2 other guys stopped me. His name was Jimmy Waterman. He was from Lindsay. But yeah, I didn't want to just hit him. I wanted to kill him. That's how quick it came about. I had a real bad temper.
Yeah. Well, that's what David's doing, saying, and we let that happen to us without stopping to think. How big a deal is this really, right? And should I do anything about it or just let God handle it? David now realizes, because of God bringing Abigail to him, that just let God deal with it, right? Who, by the way, obviously does.
Probably like most road rage incidents.
Exactly.
A guy that you've never seen before and a guy you'll probably never see again does something, and then you want to.
He cuts you off or whatever, and you honk at him. He flips you off, and now you're ready to kill him.
Yeah.
I pulled out 45.
Yeah. Stuff like that. Verse 35, David received from her hand what she had brought, and he said to her, "Go up to your house in peace. See, I have listened to you and granted your request." Abigail came to Nabal, and because he was holding a feast, right? By the way, she didn't get a lecture from David, did she? He just accepted what she said. And Nabal's holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, and he was very drunk. So she did not tell him anything at all until the morning light. How much stuff did he spend on this feast? How many animals were killed, etc.? This probably would have fed all of David's guys. So it wasn't like he was short stuff, was it?
Mm-mm.
He could have easily have given it, right? But according to his name, he's a fool. Verse 37, it came about in the morning that when the wine had gone out of Nabal, that his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, so that he became as a stone. He went into a coma, right? Paralyzed. Now, did he have an aneurysm? Did he have a heart attack? It says his heart died. You know, I don't know if that's a literal heart died or you know.
Well, I can speak from experience. If you drink that much, as it implies that he did, you'll feel dead the next morning.
Oh, this is more than that.
Yeah.
Because he's about to die. 10 days later, it happened that the Lord struck Nabal and he died. So who took revenge on Nabal?
God.
God did. What does Romans 19 tell us? Vengeance is mine.
Saith the Lord.
Right? So why do we want to do it? It's not up to us whether we think we owe it, think we have the right to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't. God says that's up to me. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be the Lord, who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and has kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has also returned the evil doing on Nabal on his own head." David knew that God is the one that took Nabal out, right? Then David sent a proposal to Abigail to take her as a wife. Remember, she was good looking.
And she was smart.
And smart, right? This is the kind of woman you want to have around. Okay? When the servants of David came to Abigail at Carmel, they spoke to her, saying, "David has sent us to you to take you as his wife." And she arose and bowed with her face to the ground. Who is David? Actually, the king of Israel, right? God's anointed.
Mm-hmm.
"Behold, your maidservant is a maid to wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Who washed the feet?
Jesus.
As an example. But in a normal household, who washed the feet? The lowest servant.
Yeah, lowest servant.
The lowest servant. And Abigail quickly arose and rode on a donkey with her 5 maidens who attended her. Remember, she was pretty wealthy, right? You know, in those days, there were a lot of marriages that were political in nature.
Sure.
You know, having Abigail as a wife, besides the fact that she was smart and good looking, she was also rich and connected.
Now, did let's say if there were no sons or anything, would she be the one that would inherit then?
It's hers until, you know, if she didn't have a son yet,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
If he had no sons, like he might have had other wives,
Yeah.
for example. We don't know of any, but, right? So we're having to assume.
Okay.
But anyway, she followed the messengers of David and became his wife.
Yeah, 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, just right there alone. You know.
No telling what else he has, right?
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
think of the lands and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay. David had also taken Ahinoam to Jezreel, and they both became his wives. Now Saul had given Milcah, David's wife, his daughter, right, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was from Galim. Would you want to be Palti? Hanging on to one of David's wives? I think I'd be pretty nervous,
Uh-huh.
especially after Saul dies. Right? Anyway, it's quite a lesson that God is showing us here on how we can let our emotions get away from us and do stuff that's not within our realm to do. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We don't need to return even evil for evil, you know. Matter of fact, doesn't tell us in Proverbs if we return good for evil, it's like pouring hot coals.
No fear.
All right. Do we have any last minute comments, questions?